Hola, queridas, queridos. Welcome back to the Beam and Flow podcast, a nitty-gritty exploration of your body, energy, awareness, movement, and flow. I am your host, Chloé. Here we go. Enjoy the show. Buenas. Okay. So, this episode, I don't even know. I don't even know where to start. This is so special. This episode I recorded con mi mamá, con mi mami. I recorded this episode with my mom, and I'm so grateful that she agreed to do this. I love my mom, and we have been through a lot, and there is a lot of wisdom that my mom carries that I know is not the messaging that we typically hear. And I really wanted to share this conversation with you. You may completely disagree with what she says, and you may be like, wow, this is such a different perspective. I love this. I want to find out more. Either way, I'm here for it. Let's have the conversation. I do this show, I create this space so that we can explore together. And we're in this episode, my mom and I talk about her experience in being a mom at different phases in her life. My mom had me when she was 20. She had her next set of children when she was in her mid to late 30s. And she had her last child at 49. So she has been a mother through as a child, basically, and now she's still a mother to young children in her late 50s. So she has some really beautiful things to say, and we talk about what the experience of motherhood is like at those different stages. What it was like for her to be a single mom with me. We talk about how hard it is to be a mom working in the home and outside the home. It's really, really difficult, and we get into that. We talk about the myths that we have been sold as women over the last 60 years in the United States. And some other ways of looking at power and being in your power. And it's a really different conversation around that. So I'm really excited to share this with you. I would love to hear your thoughts. I'm sure that this is going to trigger some conversations and some reactions and some emotions, and I'm here for it. Let's get into it. DM me, comment, share. Please share this episode. I really think that you're going to get into some pretty amazing conversations with friends and family over this one. So please enjoy this wonderful episode con mi mamá, Nisa. So, Mom, mi mamá, mi mami, I think you were a little surprised when I asked you to come on the show. Am I right about that?
Yes.
Well, I don't actually even know if you've listened to any of the episodes or if you want to listen to any of the episodes.
No.
Probably not. But I will say that I get my curiosity and my inclination to look outside of what's being presented to me from you. And I think that in all of the ways that our relationship has changed over my life, I mean, my life that's when you became a mother. So I think as an adult, our relationship really got closer through both of us. And you have always been this way, but through me really stepping into looking at things from a more natural perspective, and really getting serious about wellness and connection in my life. And I think that while we see things in some particulars differently, I think we actually do see a lot of life in the same way. Um, and so this season of the podcast is all about women's health and the stories that we've been told and how that's shifted or how we've come to know the truth as we've gotten older. And so I really wanted to talk to you about motherhood because I think you have a very unique perspective that not many people will have or get to hear from because you've been a mother in like starting again in 3 different decades of your life.
Yep.
And so I'm curious, like, what's changed for you about motherhood? I mean, you had me at 20. You
Yep.
were 20 when I was born, and one of the big differences was you were a single mom with me, and you have a full family unit now
Yep.
with my siblings. But talk me through it from your perspective. Like, what are some of the different things that you've noticed, not just all the way from now to or from when I was born to the youngest, who's I won't share their names if you don't want me to, but
Okay. Yep.
yeah, the youngest who is 8,
Yep.
right? Yeah, and I'm 37, so there's the
Yep.
age gap there for people to fill in on. But there's other children who are now adults in the middle of that too. So
Yep.
from each stage, how has it changed for you?
Well, what in particular? Because there's so many changes. There's the physical changes of myself just being older and things that I can and cannot do. That's just physical. There's the um, I would say the wisdom of have lived life a little bit longer, and how I view motherhood now as opposed to 37 years ago. And like you said, and having different set of circumstances. When you were born, for most of your childhood, I was single, so that's a whole different perspective than raising children and being a mother when you have someone to relieve you in the middle of daily grind. So where, like, how would you want me to, maybe you want to
Well,
rephrase that a little if you're looking for something more specific.
yeah, I mean, I would love to get into actually everything that you mentioned, but let's start with the idea um, of what it actually is to be and the difference that you've experienced being a single mom and being a wife and a mom at the same time and having a partner in raising your children. I think there's like a myth around like the cult of single motherhood now, and not that, and I'm not trying to in any way, shape, or form demean being a single mom. I think it takes so much work and love, but I think that people aspire to that in some ways now. And I for one have always been on the opposite side of that just because I saw how hard you worked and what a struggle it was. And so I never understood this desire to be like, oh, well, whatever, I'll just do it on my own. To me,
Right.
it was like, what, why? So, let's start there. Like, what was the biggest, what's the biggest change in that respect?
Well, truthfully, being a single mom in my case, uh, and I know that not everyone, there are different circumstances how that arises. Um, and of course, whether it's divorce or people separate, so that's a little different because sometimes there's still a dad in the picture. In my case, I was totally single from the time pretty much that you were conceived. Um, Obviously, I wasn't conceived. You weren't conceived by myself. There was someone else involved. But uh, I wanted to be a mom as far back as I could remember. But the but wanting to be a mom was really a selfish desire. And what I mean by that is I I never thought of the person that was coming into life and how that would look like if I didn't have a nuclear family. So, with that as a foundation, I went into it thinking I could do it all. And the truth is, you can't. You can, but you just can't do it well. So, there were things as a single mom that got missed, um, that I just didn't see when you're in school all day, and then I come home and I'm picking you up and getting dinner ready, baths, homework, you go to school. There's really not enough time to go deep into heart issues, like really what is going on and how are you feeling. And discipline issues can be hard because, and we've had this conversation many times, discipline will flow out of stress, frustration, anger, any and all of the combination above. Um, and that's hard because you're working all day and you're tired, and all of a sudden you get this little 5-year old that says, well, I'm going to do. And you say, well, no, you're not. But the response, though you do want to address someone who is being disrespectful, the response should not be out of anger, if that makes sense. So, and there's a lot more pressure on you as a single parent, where you can't say to someone else, you know what, I really had a hard day. Do you mind just dealing with this? There's no one to deal with. Like, you are on 24/7. Um, on top of that is the financial. I mean, it's all on me. It was all on me financially. And I remember, and of course, I don't feel guilty about this because it's so silly. But you'll get it. You may remember this. We lived in a nice little city in northern New Jersey, and uh, we were walking the streets, and you said, like, you wanted ice cream, and I said no. And you said, we're so poor, we can't even have ice cream. The fact is, we weren't really that poor. We could have had ice cream, we just didn't that day. But that was the way you kind of thought of things. Like, okay, well, so that communicated to me, I can't give you everything. Not that giving you everything would have been a good thing anyway. That, um, but that burden of, I didn't feel like uh, you had a complete childhood because there were things missing. And I go back to, that was my choice. So my choice affected you. Now you compare that now to, um, I'm married, I have a husband, we have children, and I'm gonna no matter which stage you start with, you learn as you get older. So, um, when Dad and I first got married, you were 13, and that was like a whole paradigm shift for everybody involved. And we had to kind of readjust where our place was in our home, which is hard, and especially hard for you since this is the only life you've known. And then when we got married and we had our first child together, the first one after you, then looking at, okay, so now what does this look like? It was actually very hard for me to have to say, hey, how do you think we should handle this? Because now I'm not handling it on my own. I'm talking to someone else. Like, what do you think about discipline? What do you think about education? What do you think about allowance? Like just little things that I would have never even thought, well, that's silly. Why do I have to talk to anybody else about that? Well, you do, because that child is not only yours, it belongs to someone else. And with her, how, um, things change. I'll start with like one simple thing, and that was school. And we talked. I think I was pregnant. Maybe I wasn't pregnant, but we were planning on getting pregnant. And I said, I just want to let you know that I know that your mom homeschooled your brother, but that is not happening. I'm not going to homeschool. I work. And now it was, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years later that we started to homeschool. And here I am homeschooling. I don't know how many years it's been, 14 years that we've homeschooled. So how different that looks. I always felt that as a parent, you needed to be involved in your child's education. But how that evolved over, 6 children is just very different. And the frustration, and not that there's not any frustrations, but I don't have the frustration of having to be on all the time. So if I'm having a hard day and I'm like, you know what, I just need to be in bed today. I need to just curl up in a ball and have my little pity party. I could always say, hey, Dad, can you just take over? That's huge. And on the flip side of that, then having children to see what that looks like, that there's someone else that they can run to, who also has their back and who sees, like, there's just a difference in a dad and a mom, and the way we discipline and the way we talk and the activities like that we like to do. It's just very different. So having that, I think, just makes a very well-rounded person. um I don't know if I got off the topic of the question or not.
No, I think you answered it perfectly. So
Okay.
you had said that there was a lot of things that changed in terms of motherhood over 37 years. So how has it
Mhm.
changed physically? Because I think people would be surprised to know that you had natural pregnancies. Like it was, there wasn't IVF. It
Mhm.
was, you naturally conceived in your 30s and then in your late 40s. And
Yep.
I think people are would be surprised by how your body has responded, especially given your medical history prior. So how has like the physical aspect of motherhood, whether it was pregnancy, or just the energy and what you're able to do now, how has that changed?
Well, with pregnancy, I have, and again, it's like a how you grow. So I've grown in my health and wellness. And with you, it was a really easy pregnancy. I didn't feel like I didn't feel any different. I didn't look any different. I was 20 years old. I had a cute little body. If I was 8 or 9 months pregnant, if you turned me around and you saw me from the back, you wouldn't even know that I was pregnant. Um, Crazy story. So you were born early January, and New Year's Eve, I'm out. No, it wasn't New Year's Eve. It was right after New Year's Eve. I'm out with a few girlfriends, and we are out dancing. And here I am, 9 months pregnant on the dance floor at 1 o'clock in the morning.
And then you wonder where I get it
That would not happen.
from.
Yeah, well, that would not happen right now. 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm in my bed. Okay, that's done. So that changed. Um, but in between you and your next sibling, you did mention that I was sick. So that really started. my whole health journey. With you, the part of the health and wellness that I had was more related to my grandma. Yeah, your great grandma, and some of the remedies that we would use were just very holistic. Um, you had a terrible time. I tried breastfeeding you and I couldn't. And there was, at that point, it wasn't, breastfeeding wasn't a thing. So there was really, I didn't know where to look for help. So I ended up giving you formula, and that was a disaster. And she was like, just give her goat's milk. I'm like, goat's milk. And at this point, I was ready to try anything. And I did. And we tried the goat's milk and it worked. Um, and of course, please, this is not medical advice. If someone says something about goat's milk, yes, I know it doesn't have whatever it doesn't have. But anyway,
But these
it
are
worked. That's
old
all I need to say. And
Puerto Rican remedies
yes,
to the problem.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
You had colic, and she said, make you anise tea. Well, that does work. And that's what I gave you. So those were like little hints along the way of my life of health and wellness. And wow, actually, these things do work. So, and then after I got sick, and then after I got pregnant with your sister, uh, each child, I just got more natural and taking away anything that I felt might be toxic or anything that had any kind of link to cancer, whether it was founded or not. If there's a question about it, I'm not going to wait till we get the answer before they decide, oh, yes, by the way, that does cause cancer. Now I've been doing this for 10 years. So if there was any kind of question, I kind of avoided that. I tried to stay physically fit. I worked out, even like I said, my last pregnancy, I was 49 and I was still working out. I did a little bit of yoga. I did a little bit of Pilates, and I did not as much, not much cardio at that point, but I was working. So um, I was doing cardio at work for sure. And the difference with, the first one, you, and the last one, um, I could really run still. Like I said, my energy level was high and I was good. By the time I'm 49, I wasn't, and this is probably not, it has to do a little bit with age, but also with multiple pregnancies. I felt like this child was hanging in my butt, like from week 20. So I was just moving slow. Um, but I do think when you start from a good foundation, so if you're starting that your body is already healthy, and you are active, and this is a natural pregnancy, it, and that's a whole other subject that we can get into. But when things happen on their own, the body is an incredible machine and it knows how to take care of itself. So getting pregnant naturally at 49 and having already had taken care of my body and been in, I would say, pretty good health, made the pregnancy that much easier. Not that it was like perfect. And like I said, I was tired, but um, I had no complications. So what people might say, oh, well, uh, high blood pressure, diabetes, whatever else, early um, early labor. I didn't have any of that. With well, with one, I had a little bit of early labor, but especially looking at the last one, I didn't have any. And I do attribute that to multiple factors, just like I mentioned before. Um,
Another question that I had around how things have shifted is, so, okay, um, your community definitely changed. I witnessed it changing through throughout each phase of motherhood, for you. So I remember when I was little, most of your friends didn't have children. Like they were
Right.
young adults, right? And that was your community. And then in
Right.
your second round, you were in your mid 30s, so that there were a lot of other parents with kids around. I remember noticing that difference. Like there was,
Right.
and now you're like a bit older than the parents of your youngest children's friends.
Mhm.
So, what has it been like to be a mom with different sets of community like that? I would imagine it affects you, no?
It keeps me young. So with you, I was the first in my community to have a baby, and then my friends started getting married, um, and that kind of changed things a little bit, obviously, in the dynamics of the friendships. But um, we were peers. We were still all peers. Then in the second round, and then I was in my 30s, I still had friends, but most of my friends probably were still in their 30s. So they were peers and they were family groups. Um, so it was more of, hey, we're doing this parenting thing together, and that I think is very typical. And you take advice from your peers, like what's working for you now. Um, I would say many of my friends are younger than I am. So we just went out to dinner with some friends and family. Like it was insane. We had one family who has 7 children, another family who has 4 children, and we brought our the 4 that we have at home and my niece with us. So there was a lot of people everywhere. Um, but your dad and I are in our 50s. Then we had another set that was in their 40s and another couple that was in their 30s. Um, and what I realized is that it just keeps me young. Like it keeps me up to date on what people are thinking and how they're thinking. And it's interesting because I can pour into them from my wisdom and experience, and they can pour into me from what's keeping their pulse on what's happening in kind of like real time. So in that perspective, and I actually appreciate it. So I mean, that's what I personally think. That's one of the perks of having children when you're older, because it does keep me young. Like I know about Instagram and Snapchat, and I'm not sure what the next one is just yet, but I'm sure I'll know about that too. And these young women that I'm around also like-minded, where you know the one that's in her 30s, she's the one who has 7 kids. Well, she wants to really stay healthy, so she's starting a running club. I said, well, count me in, I'll run with you. um, so it's very encouraging in a different way. And I think it's more the way society used to be. um, because right now it's a very transient society. So people move away and you don't have that community of so many different ages where you can glean from each other. And I think that's where I am right now, which is kind of neat.
That's pretty cool. I that is something that I hope to emulate, is as I hopefully start bringing children into the world. Uh, I really liked the idea of just the nuclear family. Never made sense to me. Like it just never seemed like enough resources. You need community around you, and I think that's one of the things that I see missing from a lot of parents that I know, they struggle, I think, in a big way because it's just mom and dad, right? And there's not much support outside of just the two of them, and life can be stressful. It takes work to raise good humans. So I really appreciate that perspective. Um, what what do you think are some of the biggest myths about motherhood, or how have you seen maybe the stories we tell about motherhood shift throughout your life?
Mm, um, well, one myth is you can't be a mom and a dad. You're a mom, and you got to suck that up and realize you can't be the dad. And that's hard. That nobody wants to hear that. Uh, that's a myth. The myth that you can um, be a good employee and a good mother 100% of the time is a myth. And I know I've done it. Um, I'm more present now that I'm not working than I was. Like, there was when, let's see, I can't even remember, maybe in the 70s, there was this big billboard. That's what smoking was cool. You've come a long way, baby. Like, you can have it all. You can't. Like, you're working 9 to 5, you come home, you're exhausted, and you're putting food on the table, and you're giving your child like what's left over, basically. And then your husband what's left over on the leftovers. So being, however that looks like today, just being physically there. That okay, here's a good myth: quantity over quality. That's a lot of BS. Because kids don't know what quality is. They know what quantity is. They know that mom and dad are around. So yeah, putting the time in, that would be like one of those myths. And like, I know you use the term to grow good humans, to grow like good citizens. It doesn't happen magically. You just don't think, oh, I'm going to be kind to them and I'm just going to love them and give them everything that they want, and they're just going to turn out to be these wonderful citizens. It takes work. It takes work. And probably if you put in a lot of work, the first 5 years, you will reap like probably for the rest of their lives. We're talking about good work ethics, and being respectful, and learning about the world that's around them, how to interact with people, uh, how to love what you love. You do that early on, and then later on it's much easier. You have a harder time undoing a bratty, temper tantrum, selfish little child and making them into this, humble, serving adult. That's tough. Yeah. So the hardest work is in the beginning, and then it gets easier.
I think I have a lot of uh, parents to young children who will be happy to hear that it gets easier, because I think that's one of the myths too, is that it's just always hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for me, I feel like I've seen an increase in messaging, whether it's in TV shows, movies, especially now with social media. But this like almost having a child to check it off the list, but then expect that you have to like you're fitting the
Mm-hmm.
child into your life as opposed to allowing your life to change by
Mm-hmm.
becoming a parent. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
not so you've seen you've seen a lot of people become parents. You worked as a labor and delivery nurse for what, over 20 years. Um, so in addition to the different stages of your own life where you were a mother to young children, adolescents, adult children, you've seen it. You've seen that initiation of motherhood begin for so many people, and I'm I'm just wondering what your experience has been. Like, do you, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's just not, maybe that myth isn't something that people have bought into and that's just the messaging that we're receiving. But what do you see? Do you see people ready to be transformed by the experience of motherhood, or do you see it the opposite way where it's like, how am I fitting this into my life?
Okay. All right. So I started with the answer of me being in a college class many years ago, and that professor said how you're going to choose a something that you're studying, and you may change your major 2 or 3 times before you actually decide on what you want to do, and then you may even change careers. And we're preparing you with all these classes in 4 years, so we're taking 4 years minimum to prepare you. Um, Meanwhile, most people will be a parent and there's not one class that you take. Like, how? And again, we go back to that whole thing where we don't even see it modeled well. Um, as a nurse, I would tell my patients, once you're pregnant, it's not about, guess what? It's not about you anymore. So you're having this child, life is going to change. And your job now is to bring up this little one, because they have nothing. It's not only providing them food and shelter, but providing them good morals and the ability to think, critical thinking, which is lost today completely, um, and to have good discussions. I mean, you and I do not agree on a lot
100%.
of things, but we can
Mhm.
definitely have some good discussions about them, and agree to disagree, um, and still be respectful. I mean, yeah, there have been times we've kind of stepped on each other's toes a little bit, and then we back off and we say, okay, wait, let's go back and address some things. Um, but we've lost that. We've lost that art of how to have a good discussion, especially if it's someone that we don't see eye to eye with. Well, that's learned. That's learned, and that's learned at home. Um, so yeah, it's not, I think we are in a culture that is self saturated, and it's all about me and what makes me feel good, and being a um, having the label of a mom makes me feel good, and having to say that I have one child or two or however many you want to have, and that makes me feel good. um, but it's not about you. It's about that you had your turn, like I had my turn, and my turn at 20 was done. That was a choice I made. Now my life, I'm not my own anymore. My turn is to be a mom, and is to do that to the best of my ability, for not for me, but for the sake of my children, and to give them the security that they need, that they feel very sure of themselves, and the way they feel sure of themselves and who they are is being loved. And being loved doesn't mean giving them everything that they need. Give Being loved means showing them what real life is like. Guess what? You have to work, and work is hard. So um, we're not on vacation 24/7. Um, we could make it easier, but it doesn't mean that it's not work. Um, Like I'm just amazed when I see some young people that they don't realize that, yeah, you have to work to make money. It's not given to you. People work. Um, so, and motherhood is one of those things. It's not a. It is a gift for sure. It is a blessing, 100%. But it is work, and if you don't go into it knowing that I'm going to have to work at this to be good and make it good, you're doing yourself and your child a disservice. So, did I get that?
Yeah, I think that definitely answered my question. Um, what what's been the most fun part of motherhood for you?
Having an excuse to do silly things. Um, yeah, because you could say, "Well, I'm going to do this." Like you might really want to do this, but well, I'm an adult and I really shouldn't. But what the heck? I got these little kids and they want to do it. Let's just do it. Uh, Seeing things, seeing life through their eyes is probably the most fun. Everything is new and exciting and fresh. It it is a it is exciting. That's the most fun for me. And then just laughing at it, laughing at some of the madness that comes along with it. Mm. I don't take things too seriously as I used to.
Do you think that is just from being older? Do you think that's from being a mom for so long? What do you think is leading you to not being as serious?
Um, Probably a little of both. I think having more children, you realize, oh, what you go back and think, well, what would I have done different? And I don't just do that with my children, but in anything, I go back and okay, so what would I have done different? And um, then I try to make those differences. And being older, you realize, I mean, you and I both went through a very difficult time um, recently, and then you got to think, well, darn, I might not be here tomorrow. So let's just have a little bit of fun today. Well, that comes with getting older because when you're young, you never think that it could be your last day. Um, I know we touched a little bit when I was 27 and I wasn't sure if I was going to live or die. And I've always said, I think it would be good for everyone to have that a little bit of an experience where you could see that you are not immortal and you know you take life a little bit differently from that point. And then of course the older I get, I think even more so that uh, there are things to take stuff serious, but I think it's more important like making memories and just I don't want to be remembered as, and I will be, I mean your sisters say it all the time, I'm not the one who's the fun one, but um I don't want to be the one who's like grouchy all the time, you know. um so yes, age and a lot of kids, you got to let go of some things.
One of the things that we talk about all the time, and I definitely talk about all the time, is hormones. Uh, and it's it's a fairly newer development, I would say. Again, since I've been an adult, more like looking into wellness and stuff, but even more, it's come out of my own healing journey with endometriosis. But it's not like we never talked about your menstrual cycle or sex. Like that was always on the table. I mean, I remember you had me watching a PBS documentary on VHS about conception and pregnancy when I was very young, like 4 or 5. And I was always fascinated. I was always fascinated by this process. Um, but even with that, and even with you being a nurse in this field, I didn't really understand my own hormones until I was in my 30s. And
Mhm.
you've definitely grown in your understanding of what hormones are doing, and how we're affected by them. So what has that, um, knowledge, how has that transformed you as a mom to other other daughters? Has it changed,
Mhm.
like, even how you approach parenting based on, where you are hormonally? Like, what has gaining that knowledge shifted for you?
Um, yeah, well, I have to agree with you that hormones are a newly, obviously, they've been around for forever. I don't know if I want to say newly discovered, but maybe newly talked about. Um, I don't think they were talked about as often, and I don't think doctors gave it importance. So it was, oh, well, this is what you're feeling, so let's just give you a pill, which is, that's what they do for everything. And again, I go back to the body being an incredible machine, and hormones are there for a reason, and you fluctuate for a reason, and what they do in your body, they're doing for a reason. So yes, I with you, we talked about, oh, this is how life is made, you know, and it's a miracle. It's still a miracle. Um, Now for your sisters, it's more like, okay, so these are seasons, and these are times that you may feel this way. I'm trying to normalize it as much as possible so that they're not coming against it in their mind thinking, oh, this is awful. Like, this is just awful. And this is what I have to look forward to. Um, and just flipping that and saying, this is a beautiful thing. This is the way that God made you, and this is what your body is doing in preparation for one day, maybe um, starting your own family. And then coming from the other angle, scientifically, well, what does that mean? Um, are you a little bit more teary? Are you a little bit more tired? Does your metabolism change? Does your what you want to eat, like your cravings, do they change? Yes. And then why? Because once you know the why of it, it's a lot easier for you to accept what your body's going through. Um, and I know you and I did a class at one point, and we were talking about hormones. When you look at the cycle um, early in a woman's cycle, so we're going to look at women's hormones because I know the most about them, know very, very little about men's hormones. Um, Maybe one day. Uh, so, in the beginning of a woman's life and her cycle, your hormones are very erratic. Um, that's intentional. That's the way they were supposed to be. What has happened is um, in that early season when your hormones are up and down and your cycles are irregular, what we want to try and do, and I'm just saying as the medical community, um, make it as easy for you as possible. So the first thing that most doctors are going to prescribe to someone who's 12, 13, 14 is birth controls. So let's fix those hormones and regulate them. Well, they're not supposed to be regulated. They're supposed to be erratic at that point in your life. So you don't fix hormones with hormones. Um, and and that point in your life doesn't really need to be fixed. Now you get into like your 20s and you start stabilizing. At that point, then if there are other issues in your hormones, then you could start dealing with those issues. But then again, you still don't want to fix hormones with hormones. you want to look at what is the underlying cause of why they are still erratic, because in your 20s and 30s, they really shouldn't be erratic. And then you get to the later stage in your life, where it's that perimenopause. And guess what? And again, they are erratic. It's like erratic and then steady and then erratic again. It's a cycle, the whole cycle. So the erratic at the end of life or end of your hormonal life is also normal. So what we need to do there, as we need to do in the beginning, is really feed them well and feed your body well, so that it doesn't just like drive you off a cliff. And again, it's that knowledge that yes, I'm going to have days, and I might be up and down, and I might gain some weight and lose some hair. And okay, so let me work with that. So how can I nourish my body? And the two biggest things are exercise and nutrition, and working with them. I'm not going to take that away. I'm still going to have that erratic cycle, but it won't be as hard on my body. First, because I know it, and second, because I've fed my body well. And then you come away from that, where your cycles are kind of like now you're at the beginning of life, at the end of life, where now there's no more cycles. So then you don't have that, and it's a different season. So part of it is looking at it holistically, that there's a reason why your hormones are here and what they're doing in that. I gave you a little bit of that when you were younger, but probably not as much as I've given your sisters. And your younger sister, of course, it's even more so like that. And then what, having them see me and you like, okay, so how do you go through a hot flash? Like, am I cursing the gods of this hot flash, or I'm just saying, okay, this is the way the Lord made me, and this is what your body's supposed to do at this season. Let me feed, instead of, and this is hard again, everything that's good is hard. So what do you want to do when your hormones are out of control? Well, give me some like apple pie and a big piece of bread and some butter. Well, is that really what I should be eating at that point? So am I medicating myself? Okay, so I took away the hormones that they want to give me, but I'm medicating myself with this poor nutrition that's now leading me into a worse state, instead of taking a step back. Okay, what I'm feeling and what I'm seeing is true, but let me give myself something a little bit more healthy to alleviate those symptoms later on. So
Yes, yes, yes to all of that. Uh, um, the the last thing that I really wanted to touch on is just what I think I've seen as um, maybe the biggest difference recently. I would say in the last year, you've been able to not work anymore. You're not working currently, and
outside
outside of the home, yes. And so I've been able to, even though I don't live with you, I've been able to just kind of watch from afar the shift of what it's been like for you to be like super present and plugged in. Not that you weren't before, but just in a different way. And I'm wondering what it's been like for you, because I've just been watching from the outside.
um, it it has made me much more intentional. Again, part of me feels a little sad that I couldn't be at home with everyone else. Now, you, of course, had the least of me, um, because you went to school, and then I was working. Um, and then with your siblings, I was still working, but I worked weekends most of the time. So I was still home during the week. now, um, the biggest thing is that I sleep. Well, I try and sleep. Like I'm not. I used to work nights, so I'm on a normal schedule, which makes me much more ready for what the day has in store. Um, and I really appreciate just like the little everyday things of I again being intentional. So I'm getting up early, try and be up before the kids. I want to be up with your dad. I get up, I make him breakfast. Yeah, we're married 25 years. I've never made breakfast. Like I made breakfast on Saturdays, but I wouldn't get up and make breakfast. So just doing those things and um, being invested in my home, that I have time to be invested in my home, uh, and not just the people in my home, but the home itself, like the aesthetics of it. That you can walk in and feel, wow, there's some peace and there's some love in this home, and I'm creating that in my home. Um, I have more time for that. That that is like huge. It's very satisfying. Um, and I think we have to be very careful too, like you said, and we don't do it intentionally. It's just our default because that's how we've been trained. Um, just because I don't have a job outside the home doesn't mean that I don't work. And I probably work harder at home than when I did clocking in and clocking out. I clocked in, did my job, forget about it. I don't have to worry about it, clock out. Um, Here, I'm invested in this. I'm invested in this house. I'm invested in these people, and I'm pouring in to see what fruit we can get from that. And that is huge.
I really like that perspective. A lot, actually. Um, and I'm really grateful that you agreed to sit down with me. I think your perspective is really valuable, and I think it's unique and can really help um, give some clarity to a lot of women. So thank you for coming on and doing this with me.
You're welcome. I hope it was something valuable for somebody.
I'm sure it will be. Um, I love you.
Love you too.
So for this moment of flow, I'm giving a little intro which I don't normally do because this isn't a poem necessarily. This actually started as a text that I wrote many years ago to my mom in the middle of the night, and then I included it in my play La Hija del Pirata / The Pirate's Daughter, and it's still true. And I'm adding a little bit to the end, but this is para Mami. Mom, I love you. And I know you don't always hear me when I say thank you. So again, thank you, Ma. Thank you for naming me after a goddess of life and fertility. Thank you for letting me play in the mud and knowing I needed to be in Puerto Rico on the farm every summer. Thank you for teaching me how to find a solid walking stick and to be proud to be smart and to think for myself and work hard. You taught me to ask for what I want because the worst thing that could happen is they could say no, and then I'm no worse off than I already am. You played catch with me when no one else would. You indulged my love of stories and music and performing. You shaped me, Mom, and I love you. Gracias por todo y te amo siempre.